three very famous panelists to be here with you this afternoon to discuss more about the future, what I call the crystal ball viewing session this afternoon. This morning we started off with the plenary talking about where technology is really available. We're bringing technology to the farmers, making technology accessible to the farmers. And then there was some other question, another panelist who says, we are ready to feed 9 billion people. A very contradictory statement. Is that true? If that is true, but why are we seeing a food crisis? Why are we seeing a very, very high rice price today? Just now we just had a chat with Mr. Vichai. Prices at $540. During the peak, it went up to $900. Are we going to see the era of $200 as productivity increase? Or once the infrastructure that we discussed just now, when we have the farm side increases in terms of productivity, as we increase the improve the infrastructure across from processing to storage to market, are we going to see the prices coming down to the normal level? I'm not an expert in this area. That's why we have three of our senior panelists here. We're going to start off with Dr. Eric Wailes, a professor in agriculture economics, who previously has successfully did an Arkansas global rice model, which is the most complete and sophisticated rice stimulation model maintained in the world. Probably he'll be using this as a fundamental structure to do his talk today. And of course, he has been with Food Agriculture Policy Research Institute at the request of the US Congress, a very, very senior appointment, to use this model to study the US and global rice policy. Apart from that, he has been with World Bank, OECD, etc. And also attached with Japanese and Chinese Ministry of Agriculture as, again, well-traveled person who knows various policies across the globe. Without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Eric Wailes to take on the talk entitled Global Rice Market, What's Happening and What's Ahead. Thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Tan. Can you hear me? Yeah? Well, it's an extreme pleasure for me to be here. I was thinking about the first time actually I visited Erie was 1985, and it coincided that week with the 25th anniversary celebration. So I feel like, okay, well, I'm sort of hitting the major milestones here with Erie, being here at the 50th. And it's a tremendous pleasure to be on this panel with very distinguished speakers. Sam and I have worked together for a number of years before Sam came to Erie, and Vichai and I have been on several panels over the years. Vichai has agreed to correct all of my misimpressions about what I'm going to talk about, but I think I've got the easy topic here. The easy topic is going to be this one. Yeah, I need technical assistance very often here. But so I won't be needing much of a crystal ball, not certainly as much as Sam is going to need, as he's going to look at some of the longer term here. What I want to talk about is basically what's happening and what are the factors driving global rice trade currently. Then I want to address what's ahead, and whether what's ahead is what's similar to what's behind here. we look a little bit at the near-term baseline projections. We've actually at Arkansas been doing this 10-year projections for the past 20 years, and so I'll give you our baseline projections that were out last spring. We're starting next week to come out with a whole new set of projections with the FAPRI group at Iowa State and Missouri. Finally, I want to end my presentation with a bit of a discussion, sort of perhaps addressing the question what should be ahead, looking at uncertainties and challenges for trade and prices. And again, I'm going to keep my focus primarily on the near-term kinds of issues. So what's happening in the global rice market? Well, we're experiencing record world rice production and consumption. With a slight expansion in trade and stocks and ongoing regional cartelization of trade, higher prices, fairly dramatically higher prices since mid-year. Weather effects in the Philippines, Indonesia, China, Vietnam, and last on this list is, even though a record production crop out of the U.S., extremely poor yields and a disappointing sort of milling output out of this market. So that's been pushing prices. Just a bit on the global balance sheet here. Milled output is up about 2% from last year. And these are USDA WASDE October projections. I expect that maybe this estimate, they'll come up with a November estimate here later today, and it may be a bit shorter than 452, but still probably a record level of output for a total supply with carry-in stocks to give us 547 million metric tons. Projections for trade for this coming year are going to be in the 30 million metric ton range, and total use at 453 million metric tons, with stocks remaining relatively stable from this past year at about 94 million metric tons, up from the 2008-09 by about 3 million. Again, this is what the historical pattern looks like for production, consumption, production in the green, consumption in blue, stocks, as one can see, have declined since the late 1990s, but is on a slight rise currently. Yeah. And finally, relatively slow growth in trade. We put trade on a big scale to emphasize here again the relatively thin market in the global rice economy that rice trade represents. In terms of projected global trade on a regional basis, we've got a projection with a small decline here in Asia, a bit of an increase in sub-Saharan Africa, relatively small decline in Latin America, and in the rest of the world. And this would be some growth primarily in the Middle East region. But this slide is also useful because it's shown generally the long-term upward trend in trade, but also a bit of the volatility that we see in this market. Stocks, again, going into the 08, food prices had fallen relatively dramatically. This was a result primarily of stock liquidation out of China, but there's been a reasonable amount of stock accumulation over the last couple of years. Certainly Thailand's procurement policies have contributed to this growth. We'll have probably record stocks in the U.S. This year, and a number of other countries are contributing to this increase in stocks. If we look at what's projected here for 2010, 2011, exports from the major exporters, we're expecting an expansion up to 10 million metric tons out of Thailand. Of course, the drop in Pakistan, slight increase coming out of India with a recovery from the monsoons, relatively little change in China, and relatively little change in the United States. Finally, in Vietnam, approaching the 6 million, but sort of the current hesitancy to sign new contracts suggests that perhaps a bit of a fall off here in terms of exports out of Vietnam, pending the spring harvest. Other exporters, we call these mid-level exporters. I think in terms of looking at sort of the emergence or re-emergence, I guess might be a better word. I think these two countries, Burma and Cambodia, are significant as we look down the line. As these countries invest in infrastructure and logistics, I think that we'll continue to see this kind of a push coming out of these countries. We have the two key South American exporters of Uruguay. Uruguay down a bit this coming year, with Argentina relatively flat. Just a few of the major importers. Again, we see Philippines. This number may be a bit low. I think that we don't really fully have assessed the impact of the recent typhoon on Philippines imports, but it appears that maybe in this 2.5 million metric ton range, about 2 million into Nigeria as the two large key importers. Bit of a fall off in Brazil and Bangladesh, Iran, and somewhat significant growth there in Saudi Arabia. Prices. I think the key thing here is to see sort of what's happened here with we have the Vietnam 5%, Thai 100% V, and the U.S. number 2, 4% broken long grain at the Gulf ports. And really sort of the movement this past year towards a real significant narrowing of the margins, but just in the last, really since mid-September, a recognition of the poor quality of the U.S. rice crop, and therefore a fairly significant jump now. We're approaching the $600 metric ton range for that price, and some upward pressure on both the Vietnam and Thai prices. I think Dr. Tan suggested $540 for the parboil coming out of Thailand currently. No sales currently being Thai as indicated in terms of the 100% B, but that's being quoted at about 500 currently. But again, I think reflecting primarily weather circumstances, we're seeing some upward push here, and although my view is that it's unlikely to get much above the $600 range in this coming spring.